the operations that I do routinely, such as compressing backups and then creating a directory and filing a directory with the backup with the name, all I have to do is just press Control-Alt-6, and that basically runs a script that I wrote. When I want to run the GIMP, I just do Control-Alt-G, and the GIMP just runs with whichever desktop I'm on. And usually I set it up to go into a specific desktop, which is designated to the graphics work that I do. And this way I kind of can arrange all my applications there. It takes time to set this stuff up. It takes time to get used to that. But the fact that I spend so much time on the computer means that it's actually worth the investment. And that's I think what the difference is between the people who kind of...
Sorry, I completely agree, but I mean, there's no reason why that functionality can't be set up with Ubuntu 11.04. I can set up scripts to do exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
The fact is that
training, it's changed.
But I mean, the fact that the base system is up and running, ready to go, is a weight off my mind, or a lot of work removed. I mean, another example I'd draw would be, I've never made any excuses about the fact that I use proprietary graphics drivers. Now, some distributions require you to install them yourself, etc., whereas Ubuntu detects it and hands it to you on a plate. Now, it's very easy to install proprietary graphics drivers. You can do it in a couple of minutes, but if Ubuntu or any distribution is going to offer me the facility to take that off me, it's another thing less to do when I'm installing a new platform. And for me, that's a good thing. It saved me 5 minutes of time. Anyway, the one thing I would say, the one thing I would say about Unity that I really dislike, maybe dislike's a strong word, I really have to get used to, is the fact that and I hope I'm going to describe this properly, it's quite difficult to put into words, but if you imagine opening an application and giving it focus, the pull-down menu is removed from the window that's executing the program and is put into your taskbar at the top of the screen, which is fine if you've got a maximized application, like say your browser, your web browser. But if you've got a desktop full of smaller, minimal apps, for example, at the moment I'm looking at a screen with gedit, a folder's open, and a few other bits and pieces. It means that in order to get to the pull-down menu, I've got to give the application focus, then move my mouse up to the top of the screen where the taskbar is, and access the menu there. It's a little bit annoying, and I can't see why they've done that. I'm sure it can be customized. I think I said in my coverage of Unity that I wanted to look at it in the way that it was presented in its default status, so that I'll be experiencing it the way that presumably Canonical wanted you to experience it. So that's one of the issues. And the other issue is, for example, with IRC, I've got Extract running, and it's what I use to talk in TechBytes. And if somebody addresses a message to me directly, the icon wobbles, pops out the screen on the left-hand side of my desktop and wobbles, and it's a very nice little effect. The problem with that is that if you don't notice it, then you miss it. It lasts for a couple of, maybe not even a second. Unlike before, where my icon would be in the taskbar and I'd have an exclamation mark flashing when there was a message for me in the IRC channel. Now, this quick wobble, if I'm not looking at the screen, I won't be aware of it unless I physically go into my chat client and have a look to see if anybody's sent me any messages. So that was another little issue that I've got. And also the other thing, Roy, I don't know if if you had anybody speak to you about this before, whether I'm just being incredibly slow. But I noticed that when the default installation didn't seem to have an IRC client for 11.04. Now maybe I've missed it, but having a look at the apps that were pre-installed, I can't see a pre-installed packaged IRC app, which is
they're starting to have some issues with space. So one thing, well, obviously things inflate as you move up the versions, and the size of the CD stays about the same, and they do have to try and squeeze the ISO to 650, assuming, they probably couldn't do 700 because some CDs don't have the same capacity. But what they try and do now is actually think about removing LibreOffice, and there is a bit of a discussion I saw today from Simon Phipps, who used to work for Sun Microsystems in his time, and was one of the major people to do with the company's open source efforts. The impression I got, without seeing the context, was that Mark Shuttleworth is trying to justify something to do with copyright assignment using the OpenOffice.org situation, which he was doing in a very unfair way to justify what he was doing with Unity. But one of the things that I found now is that even Canonical doesn't seem to want to even have LibreOffice in by default. And I'm not sure we talked about it in the previous show, or maybe it was just something we talked about in IRC, but it's a really foolish decision because lots of people actually get Ubuntu because it's a nice carrier for something to open spreadsheets with, or Word documents, presentations, things like that, especially in places where the internet connection is very slow. So people in places like Africa might just want to install Ubuntu to use an Office suite. And they think about removing that and then saying, well, if you really want that, you can get it from the web or you can get it from repositories. But that's not the purpose of actually having an ISO and spreading it around. And so this is one thing that I can tell you is that they do have some issues with space now, and they're looking at the elephant in the room, and elephant in terms of scale. So that's OpenOffice or LibreOffice in this case. They don't seem to be looking too much at Mono, which is also a very big package. And if they get rid of Tomboy, that would help a lot. And actually, we had this discussion on the phone the other day about Banshee. Do you mind telling us a bit about this program or what you think about it?
Well, to be fair, I specifically avoided using Banshee because purely because I was more interested in what Unity had to offer and what everybody was making a fuss about, and my choice of media player was more sort of I've been using Audacity and Audacious for our editing of the show and for listening to tracks, so I purposely avoided that subject. So as I put in the review on my site, there's so many issues with Canonical and with Ubuntu that can sidetrack the discussion about Unity. For example, the for purchase software in the software center, the Mono issue, Ubuntu One, and so I wanted to try and distance myself from all of that and just focus on Unity, which was.
But I do insist that you mention what you told me about Banshee.
Yeah.
Those who don't know, Banshee was developed by Novell. Of course, Novell sacked all the Mono staff, actually laid them off, so not sacked, but pretty much the same effect. The Banshee was based on Mono. It actually used libraries which we know for sure are not covered by the Microsoft Community Promise. So we know it's a patent risk. We know that Microsoft has in fact said this thing uses something which we cannot actually assure we won't be suing over. And Banshee itself is a very bloated piece of software, and some of the Mono boosters have been trying to put it in distribution since 2009. And I've been writing a great deal about it and trying to warn Canonical, you don't want this inside your house. And in fact, some months ago, they got a lot of blowback for the whole kind of GNOME contributions or sponsorships, whatever it's called, where Banshee was saying, well, if you buy songs using the media player, we are going to help sponsor the GNOME Foundation. And Canonical wanted to get some commissions out of that. So, people were just absolutely furious at Canonical, which always just did this, by the way, with Rhythmbox, no issues, until they basically picked this program from Novell and decided, well, we might as well have a mono-based media player. And you told me something that has nothing to do with patents about it, and I think you should say something about it.
Well, I mean, like I said, I didn't intend the issue to be sidestepped, but what I will say is this: I did obviously have a play with Banshee. One of the things I noticed, I don't have large requirements of a media player, and what I noticed with Banshee, and again this is my experience, so people may disagree or may vary, but that there was a lag. I was skipping through various media, and I noticed a noticeable lag when fast forwarding, rewinding through different medias, and it's something I haven't noticed ever before. Now, it's not because my system's challenged on the specs, it's not because I had a lot of things running at the same time or anything like that. So performance-wise, I was very disappointed. Now, that may be some configuration issue that I'm not aware of, that I've missed. It might be some issue with my hardware, I don't know. But it was one thing that stood out like a sore thumb when I first tried the distro and had it up and running on my machine. Again, I haven't looked into why the whys and wherefores, and I think often, certainly I've experienced with Mono and the issues around it, is that you get very sidetracked. People have very strong views about it, some rather unpleasant, and so I try
to challenge that. I'm a proponent. When people are starting to attack and try to silence you for voicing opinions, in this case, you're just talking objectively about the fact that you felt it was slow. And lots of people have been saying this for a long time. Running a whole runtime that's, Mono and the whole framework just to get the Microsoft APIs, which, by the way, aren't very good APIs, is just not going to give you very good performance, and it's just going to be a case of trying to mimic the Windows